So welcome everyone to the Fire My Belly podcast. Today I have a very, very special guest. This is my grandma, Doryce, and we are going to talk about a lot of different things in relation to grief and finding resiliency through the experience of loss, and just giving her an opportunity to tell us about her story and offer her wisdom and insight on the topic. So I'm very excited to have you, Grandma. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
As if you could say no.
Anything from my... Oh, yes.
So I want to just jump right in because I feel like, our family has been through so much in terms of grief. We've experienced a lot of different types of grief. But for you personally, when do you first remember experiencing grief in your life?
Well, I think as we discussed, there's all kinds of grief, lots of levels. Some are almost silly. As I mentioned, I can go back to being about 3 years old when my mother threw away probably a very favorite toy of mine called Jingle Bells. And of course, there's the loss of traditional family members, expectations. I think there's grief for expectations. People don't meet those expectations. But I would say the most traumatic is the loss of your cousin Haley and your Aunt Wendy, my daughter, my granddaughter, who were killed by a drunk driver in 2004. So we are actually talking almost 20 years ago. So that probably was the most traumatic and continues to be the most traumatic thing that I've had to experience. And I don't say I, meaning just myself, because we all experienced it. Everyone that loved them experienced that grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, too, something you've always mentioned and recently mentioned to me was that there's so many different types of grief. Of course, we know that everybody in our family experienced that tragedy differently. Although it was the same experience, it was, we responded to it very differently. We were all at various ages. You were a grandmother. My mom had 2 children. My brother and I, we were very, very young, 6 and 4 years old about. And so our experience of that grief certainly different from yours. But something you mentioned about grief that I like is that there's so many types, and that it can be not just the grief of losing somebody to a tragedy, but even relationships, breakups, friends passing or no longer becoming our friends. Like you said, a toy getting taken away. These are so many different experiences that we have in life where grief is presented to us, and it's a prevalent experience in life, and so we have to learn to navigate it. What, in terms of the experience with Wendy and Haley passing, was the most difficult for you to accept, and sort of just walk me through what it was like for you in that event as it was transpiring?
Well, I think differently than young people in particular passing away due to an illness, to have a third-party stranger actually take away part of you, part of your family. So I think the anger and the rage, and I continue to say fire in my belly about that, because I continue to rage on. A lot of friends who love me and care about me want me to be okay. They want me to be how I was before, and it's not possible. But I think that the rage was probably kept me upright. Because I had a goal. I was going to have him put in prison,
right,
which he
right.
that time. So that, I think that, and then there were the lonely moments. Of course, your grandpa, who since passed away 3 years ago, but he was there obviously to support me 100%, 1,000%.
Right.
And I think just knowing that my grandson, Patrick, who was survived the crash, 8 years old, losing his mother and his sister and almost his father. So there was just layer upon layer of grief and sadness, and as I said, rage, which I'm proud to say I continue to carry to this day, which I think gives me, I don't know, the gumption and part of my resiliency, which we'll talk later.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that you have to build up a sort of front, like a war front in yourself, to be able to get through these experiences, especially when there are so many people who are relying on you. I think in the case with Patrick, I mean, you were his, proxy mom. My mom was his proxy mom through that period, up into his teenagehood, same deal. And so, thankfully, my uncle Thomas, his father, made it through and was able to, care for him later on. But during that time period, it was like, yes, there were so many layers. There were me and Cameron, who were like, these are the people we see every weekend. These are the people we see for every holiday. I go to dance with Haley, 3-4 times a week. This was like the norm. And for the norm to be just swept out from underneath us so quickly, there was a lot of damage to clean up. There was a lot of healing that would have to happen, I think, later on for a lot of us. But in that moment, there had to be a bit of like, this is such an injustice, and the only way I'm going to get through this is if I can find some way to bring justice to my family. And you being a lawyer, even more so, I think that's just your innate behavior in situations where people need your help. Yeah.
Well, I learned two things about the judicial system. It is not justice system, it's judicial.
Yeah.
But I want to share a story, and maybe you will want to keep this in your podcast, and that is little 6-year-old granddaughter Floyd. We made something called helping Haley bags, because when we were to the emergency for 20 days before Haley actually passed away, we made these Haley bags, and you, with your artistic ability, you would draw on these little shopping bags that we would fill up with necessary things. Mm-hmm. One of them that I, of course, still have today is where, and I hope I don't cry right now, but you put on there, I hope you get well and all those. And one of them you said, I hope you don't die.
Yeah, 6 years old writing that.
The impact was certainly internal and external to all of us, but that hurt me too, that my 6-year-old granddaughter was hurting as well.
Yeah, and had been exposed so young to something so severe in life. Usually we don't experience death until we're a little bit older. I would say maybe the earliest is, due to natural causes, I guess is the best way to put it. It's like you're, in your late teens at the earliest. Usually you have a grandparent pass or great grandparent pass, or maybe somebody gets, cancer or something like that. But to be 6 years old and to know that, like, basically your built-in best friend, if you will, and your mom's built-in best friend, her sister, and then the grandma looking at her legacy, to have half of that wiped away in a second, is absolutely the most horrific thing that anybody could go through. So I think you were seeing that.
In particular, at 6 years old, for another child, another family experience some trauma. That's why the child was at Phoenix Children's Hospital. Yeah. Those kind of things are just so deep. Yeah. And obviously, we did Haley bags, I think, for about 15 years until COVID.
Yeah.
But it's little things where you think you're helping others helps you. It's just a little bit of medicine, if for the lack of a better word, to help yourself heal.
Yeah, we helped, and I think, again, part of that was us going through that experience, recognizing the things that maybe would have been helpful to us, and then offering ourselves as service people who can actually provide those things and take our experience and make it easier in any way, even if it's a single % easier for those people who are gonna, eventually be in that situation. I think kind of what you're getting at too is the way in which grief changes us. we would have never done those Haley helping bags if the situation hadn't happened to us. Is that a fair trade-off? I don't really know. I think in our hearts that would be a really hard thing to accept, but it certainly is something beautiful that we made out of a really chaotic and scary and awful mess. And so that brings me to my next question, which is, how has grief changed you as a person and a friend and a mother and a grandmother?
Well, I think one thing you hear from people that care about you is they want you to be how you were before,
Sure.
before tragedy, the illness, whatever it might be. And because they care about you, they want to hurry you up because they want to be the fun-loving, have a good time person you might have been. And that person, of course, died at the time of Wendy and Haley's death.
Right.
I lost my mother-in-law in Vietnam. I lost both my parents at a young age. So there's just a multitude of things. But I would say, again, when we get to the resiliency part, just being helpful to others. You and I went to Mothers Against Drunk Drivers support groups,
yeah.
and we did things with Donor Network because we donated Haley's organs. So there was just all these little things, and they're almost like a little drop into a puddle of water. One little raindrop.
Yep.
But it helped, and
yes.
so
yes.
I would say the probably the hardest thing, as I said earlier, was the loss of Wendy and Haley because of the suddenness and because it was due to a crime that was committed.
Mm-hmm.
But how has it changed me? I would say that I want to help others, not hurt. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a helper,
Mm-hmm.
but at the beginning of grief, you are what I would call a helpee. You're the one seeking help, seeking
Right.
solace, comfort, some kind of help. But as kind of there's an invisible line at one point. You find that you're not the helpee anymore, the one seeking help, but you're the one giving help.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the help you're able to provide is based on experiences and the help that others have given you
Yep.
prior.
Yep. It's a big ripple effect to the point of your puddle. Yeah.
So as a person, I might say, I don't want to say I'm a better person because I thought I was a better person before.
Right.
But I think that I can now focus on certain individuals that may be in the crisis mode. And so as a person, I continue to be a helper. That's another thing, as after the tragedy, which we referred to it, there was the ability to want to help, but not having had that as my experience. Mm-hmm. I was always the helper. Mm-hmm. And here all these people are giving me advice or patting me on the shoulder or hugging me or whatever, and it was just it was an opposite role that I had played before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah, you've definitely, in being a part of these support groups and doing the different charity work or just being around people who are going through this experience or have gone through this experience, who are looking for connection and support, to feel less alone in the experience, because it is a very lonely experience. But that's put you into the role of like grief counselor and or survivor, and so it's, I think, given you, I would hope, a sense of pride in being able to help others in similar situations, because you maybe didn't have that experience, and now you can offer them a better experience. And it is a big ripple effect, because there were a lot of people that helped us in a lot of different ways and tones and at different levels. But I think in my experience of you, grief definitely brought a lot of anxiety to our family. Around cars, around getting a phone call, and not the first thing being saying it's not an emergency.
That's exactly, I would say that.
Yeah.
Not average people, like the first thing you say before you even say hello is, this is not an emergency.
Yeah, because usually we're quick to text one another or email, and
right.
It's like, okay, but if you're getting a call, I think maybe it's that experience has lessened a lot. It could be because it's been almost 20 years. But in the beginning, I would say 10 years, that was like a really serious thing for our family, because that's the way we found out that the crash had happened, was through a call. And I remember Charlie got a call from my dad got a call from his sister. Um, just to give a little background on the situation of the tragedy, as we call it. Um, it was my mom's birthday. My grandma and my grandpa were, you guys were in Italy at the time, I think. They were traveling, and it was my mom's birthday, and we just went out to this place, in Arizona, where we're from, in Phoenix. And was it Cave Creek area? I can't really remember the exact area. Yeah, Cave Creek area. We go out, and we're all there. Wendy, Haley, Thomas, Patrick, my cousins, other cousins, and aunts and uncles celebrating my mom. Normal thing. And on our drive home, we're about halfway home, I want to say, and my dad, Charlie, gets a call from his sister. And she was like, there's been a crash. I think it's your sister. It's their car. It looks pretty gnarly. And I remember Charlie actually pulled the car over and like threw up because he was so distraught over how crazy it was. The helicopters were coming. I mean, they were all air evac'd out. It was a very, very severe car accident. This wasn't just broken legs. This was broken bodies, broken brains, broken organs. So it was really, really, really scary to probably see on Kristen's end, but then to receive that information, so scary. We ended up going to my dad's mom's house. Probably would have ended up with you at some point, but you guys were out of town, and we're there that night. But I remember being in the back of the car like, why is he upset like this? Like, what's going on? This is so crazy. Like, I've never seen him act like this. Like, my mom's crying and everything, and they can't even bring the words, to express what's happening. And so, again, I want to say, like, my whole family, the ripple effect of grief is that the entire family then experiences this like solidarity, like, okay, we have to come together and make each other okay. But also in losing people, we lose aspects of ourselves. To your point earlier, we lose aspects of ourselves that we thought that defined us in a lot of ways. My mom always says, I used to have like a super, super clean house, and it was like you could eat off the floor. And then after Wendy passed, like my priorities were not about a clean house. It was about being with my kids and making sure I spent every second I could with them. Same for you and Grampy. So that's been my observation, is like it instilled this really unique anxiety, obviously specifically around cars, but just in general for our family's well-being, which is very interesting. Not a lot of people have that.
Right.
Yeah.
We are different.
Yeah, we are different. And so my question for you then is, what advice would you give to someone? This is two-part. What advice would you give to somebody who has just lost a loved one? And then the other side of it is, what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to console a person who just lost a loved one?
Well, as I said earlier, people that care about you want you to be okay. Sometimes they say things that they think are helpful, and unfortunately it's the opposite effect.
Yeah.
One such thing, especially if someone is religious, they will often say, it's God's will, they're in a better place. Or others will, because again, they want you to be okay again, they'll say, time heals all wounds, you'll be fine.
Right.
Hang in there. So to be supportive is just, it's so individual. Mm-hmm. Some people will be crying, and what you would think is sliding over a Kleenex box to somebody that's crying.
Right.
We learned this in our support groups. Does that mean, this is to comfort you, or use a Kleenex and stop crying?
Yeah, right.
So it depends. It's how the person perceives it. It's not what's said. It's what's heard.
And also, not what you're saying is like it's not one size fits all.
That's exactly right. But I would say that a lot of things that troubled me was the fact or this belief that I would get over it. Mm-hmm. Or that it was God's will, and there's another group of individuals who believe in something called the sacred contract. Mm-hmm. That sacred contract is that prior to becoming earthly beings, humans, we decided that this would be our life. I don't attribute that to have any relevance in my view, but a lot of people that I know do, and I would never ever challenge anyone to say
Sure.
it's wrong that you believe they're in a better place, and it's wrong that you think you decided to do this prior to your earthly being. So that's another whole subject.
Sure.
I would just say that just like anything, you have to know your audience.
Yeah.
You have to know who you're talking to. When I talked to my little 6-year-old granddaughter who made that beautiful Helping Haley bag where she said to this child, an unknown child, "I hope you don't die." That was beautiful. It was terrible that that my little darling had to have that feeling at all.
Yeah.
She should be, she should be at dance lessons having a very good time.
Right.
I would say also changed how we interact with one another. Some of our family members do not want to talk about it.
Right.
They certainly don't want to hear the rage and whatever that I may still want to, talk about. So I have to rein myself in.
Yeah.
On who I'm talking with, and that's what I've learned to do over the 20 years. I think in the very beginning, if I was at the grocery store checking things out, I would tell the cashier.
Yeah.
And now I always wear this heart. Now this is a double heart, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, that's very pretty," and I in the beginning I'd say, "Well, that's to represent Wendy and Haley, and they're over my heart." Okay. Now someone says, "That's a really nice pin. Thank you." Sorry.
Yeah.
So time changes our demeanor towards other and what we're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And also our experiences too. It's like if you haven't been through something tragic like that, you might not know what to say, and you maybe don't need to say anything. Maybe it's about asking that person more so what they need or what they want, so that you are respectful of the context of that person's beliefs or the context of that person's experience. I would agree very much to that. And I also think your point about the pin is super profound, because it shows that our capacity for our grief grows, and that grief never changes. I don't think we're ever going to feel like, it's okay. Like, no, it's not okay. I'm not okay with what happened. It's bad what happened. It's sad what happened. It's wrong what happened. But we are all doing better at living life, even though we carry around this grief. I saw a wonderful visualization of this where it was like a giant black ball, and the ball was inside of a glass jar. And it said, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And the jar is what got bigger. The jar, the capacity to hold this grief got bigger. So I think that's very much kind of what you were getting at there, and it's true. Time doesn't necessarily make the grief go away. Time makes it easier to carry and easier to maybe work from in a way that, again, can service other people and help other people, rather than just be, I'm isolated in this experience. This is scary. This is alone. This is dark. This is deep. We can kind of bring that darkness to light, and then shed that light for other people as well.
When I say often, I'll say it gets softer, and maybe just carrying a heavy knapsack after you've carried it on your back for a long time, it's just part of you, and it's not something that's been just thrust on your back. But I do think that our family is extraordinarily special. Some families separate; they can't handle it, and they don't want to handle it. We've been very, very fortunate because we are so united. We think differently. We're all the same, only different.
Yeah.
Okay, we're
sure.
Only. But again, a lot of people deal. We said earlier, I think you said that we loss of relationships. I mean, the loss of your grandpa who died suddenly of cardiac arrest. That's a whole different kind of grief, and in some ways it's sort of a selfish grief, because who's going to open the pickle jar?
Right.
Okay. And then I've lost friends, and I said earlier, I think I did, I lost a brother-in-law in Vietnam who was only 18 years old,
Right.
and loved Ricky.
Yeah.
But
almost named a kid after him.
That's right, exactly. So I think that the joy, and we'll get to the resiliency, I'm sure, I know we will, but the beauty of my great granddaughter and my great grandson to happen, and you and your brother and Haley's brother, the joy that you give me, just, maybe the grief had taken something away from me. I'm getting so much more with having you in my life. That is so important to me.
Yeah, that definitely leads us into this side of resiliency and this sort of like grief to gratitude embodiment, which I personally have had to experience. There's family members on obviously my other side that, of course, was devastating to you and was hurtful and sad to see your family going through it, but it wasn't as direct for you as, say, with Grampy or with Wendy and Haley. And I think our resiliency shows up as differently and as uniquely and personally as our grief does. But I have seen in our family exactly what you're explaining is a united front in that experience. We're always there for each other, in like really serious ways. We can have a million different opinions and a million different beliefs, but at the end of the day, our joy for one another to be alive, our gratitude and appreciation, and how much we cherish and relish in the experience of one another is so real and so deep, and it is something special, because a lot of families do get disconnected from tragedy, and they sort of, I don't know, they revert into this version of the family that is broken and remains broken. I think all of us individually kind of chose to be a little bit more connected because of it, rather than the opposite. We needed that from each other. We had lost such a big puzzle piece. There was no way we were going to just let that be a whole. We had to all come together to fill it up ourselves. And before we get into sort of like what has made you resilient, and this, grief to gratitude embodiment, I would just love to know, like what spiritual beliefs, or what spiritual beliefs have grown from this experience for you, or what spiritual experiences have you had since losing loved ones, and those I think do tie into your resiliency as well. But I'd love for you to share them.
All right. Well, my comfort does not come from religion. My comfort comes from knowing with all my heart and soul that they're always with me. Maybe because I'm a lawyer and I like to have exhibit A, B, and C. There are just a multitude, almost daily, of some connection, some hug that I feel, just something very simple. But two of my favorite stories is one when you were at a dance recital at the Herberger Theater in Phoenix. And you were with I think you were probably maybe 7 at the time, and you're dancing. And I go to another dressing room because it's quiet. I'm trying to tell Grampy we were there and whatever. And I go into an empty dressing room, and corner of my eye, or I'm just really drawn to it, under the border of the wall looked like a penny. So with my finger, I pulled this penny out, and not having glasses on, I went to your mother and I said, Ronnie, I just found a penny. No vending machines. There'd be no reason for this penny to be, 2/3 stuck under a border.
Or for you to even notice it.
For me to even notice it, yes. What was extra 1,000 times special, the year of that penny was 1994, the year Haley was born. She was telling us, I'm here.
Yep.
We have found a U.S. penny at the Vatican, letting us know that they're with us. Recently, Wendy was 57, and I got change, and the quarter was 1967, the year she was born. Statistically, who knows? It could be 1,000,000,001.
Right.
But
Right.
so I certainly believe that they are with us. Unfortunately, not the way I wanted them to be. I would
Right.
like to know 30-year-old Haley
Mm-hmm.
and 7-year-old Wendy
Mm-hmm.
and all of the attachments that would go with that. But rather than think once they're gone, which a lot of people attribute to that, and that
Sure.
if that provides their comfort, I would not ever challenge it.
Right.
But so spiritually, they're with me. They're with me right now.
Right. Right. And I think my interpretation of that too, because I have experienced so much death so quick in my life. I mean, like a lot. It's very much that too. It's like, I'm under the understanding. I don't come from any religious background either, and my understanding of it is like energy can never die, and we are energy. So even if they're not here in a physical form, they're somewhere. And because we've connected, because we have existed in the same place before, it's likely that we always have a connection. I'm a big believer in just energy scientifically, but spiritually, and so I have the same sort of belief. It's like if I need to call upon that energy, I can do so because I myself am energy. I'm a part of this, and this gets into quantum physics, but which we won't do. But this expansive reality that we live in, there are connections that don't go away, and there is energy that cannot be destroyed. It can only be changed, and there are many experiences I've had. The other day even. I was sitting there and I was just kind of, dozing off at the TV, and then all of a sudden I get this picture in my mind of a sunflower, which is, sunflowers are you and mom and Grampy to me. That's just what I attribute. I attribute my parental figures and my dad in a way. I attribute your guys' energy to that yellow kind of flower, that sunshine, that always embracing and comforting sort of essence. And just all of a sudden had this image, and I was like, oh, hi Grampy, so we have this beautiful way of connection with our angels, as we call them, of course, and that never goes away, and we can build on it in lots of other ways too. And but it is interesting when we have these weird synchronicities, and it's just like, how did that happen? How could that have happened? And I think those things hold us up and make us resilient too. So having some type of belief, having whatever it is for you, whatever brings you solace, as long as it doesn't hurt others, it's probably relevant to you, and it should be utilized as a source of resiliency. And so let's just dive into that. I mean, for you, what has been your keys to resiliency at 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, almost 20 years now, to want to remain here in life?
Well, because of all of you, I love you. I will say that in the very, very, very beginning, I really thought, I can't live with this grief. I have to go away.
Yeah.
And it was like, but if my sadness is this extreme, how could I impose that kind of sadness to those I love?
Right.
So my love for my family was what saved me from just wanting to depart from the grief.
Yeah. And
I think that I wanted to live to experience new things, which I have been able to do. I think that resiliency has a lot of factors. Some people can be resilient because they just don't care that much. It's like, oh, okay, ho hum, I'll just move on.
Yeah.
But resiliency takes time, and I think people early in their grief, they want to be better yesterday, just like people care about them. And as you know, there's these different stages that were created by a lady, actually a doctor named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she wrote these 5 different stages. It has been misinterpreted for years. First of all, that book was written for people who were in a hospice situation and they were dying themselves.
Very specific context.
That's right. And so it's nice to have a format or some kind of a something to work from. But and we talked about this, it's like a wave. You'll feel okay, and then all of a sudden something will happen. Something will trigger a birthday, even somebody else's wedding. That, like, why didn't Haley have the wedding, or why didn't Wendy get to be a grandmother? So these things flood in without warning. But the good thing, and I sometimes use the analogy of people who have migraines. It's the same, the analogy. And that is, people who have migraines, they know they're going to get a migraine. But they also know they're not going to live with that 24/7 for the rest of their life.
Right.
It will subside. So I found with part of my resiliency is to know that even the deepest depth of my sadness and grief and anger, whatever it might be, this too shall pass. Doesn't mean it's not coming back.
Right.
But know that I can survive it. In the beginning, you absolutely think you are stuck in that misery for the ever. And that's where resiliency, just knowing there will be happy days again.
Yeah.
But at the time, you may not be feeling it, but just the experience, again, using the example of a migraine.
Yeah.
People with migraines, it's terrible, but they know they're not stuck in that pain forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, a big point of that is that you have to allow those emotions, whatever they are, anger, sadness, whatever those thoughts are, sorrow, deep regret, rage, those things have to be acknowledged and validated, because otherwise, if we suppress them or we try to push them away because they are difficult emotions to navigate and manage, we become more of that, right? It's almost like, okay, I'll get to the dishes later. I'll get to the dishes later. I'll get to the dishes later. And then the next time you look at the dishes, that's piled up 6 feet high, right?
So no more clean dishes.
And then you're like, yeah, I'm just going to throw all these dishes away and get a bunch of new dishes, right? And then the problem's not really solved. And I think with grief, that's such a prominent part of it is like a migraine. It is like waves, the sorrow will come, and those trigger moments and those dates and things like that will continue to happen. But because your capacity over time has enlarged, your ability to navigate those migraines, if you will, or those waves of sorrow becomes stronger, and you become more resilient. I like to remind a lot of people, whether they're clients, friends, family, that resiliency is our superpower as humans. Somehow, some way, we can choose to move through things that are absolutely horrible, that are absolutely traumatic. And we do it time and time again at varying levels. I think it is going to be in our best interest to continue to find that kind of resiliency. So I like to tell my friends and family and my clients that resiliency is like a muscle in our body that we have to work out. Any type of self-healing that you're doing, or habits you're trying to break, that is a muscle in your body that you have to, an energetic muscle, if you will, that you have to have continuous and consistent practice with to strengthen and to build that resiliency, to your point. So I think with grief, our muscle around handling it and managing it and doing something about it, it just becomes stronger the more we allow ourselves to experience the emotions related to it, the thoughts related to it. Because if we do try to invalidate it by suppression, it's only going to talk louder, it's only going to get heavier, it's only going to get worse.
Well, I would say, too, that I would caution those who are, especially in the early grief. I remember going to support groups, and they would say, oh, you're still raw. And it's like, you think I'm ever going to be unraw? That was me. But I think that in time, as I said, you're not so fearful that you're going to be stuck in that horrible where you can't sleep or eat or do any of those things. I do think it's important to recognize, and these are some negative things, but it's something that people who are grieving need to know. You're not going to be able to take a pill to get resiliency.
Right.
Not going to have 5 bottles of beer that's going to give you satisfaction or any kind of comfort, because it's only going to create a different kind of discomfort.
Yes.
And the other thing, there are a lot of people that have very, very, very good skills, whether it be a medium or a teacher, a lecturer. But there is also a lot of people who take advantage of your grief. They will offer to, I don't know, I'm going to call it snake oil is what I'm going to take. So you have to, what I'm trying to say now is that you have to be cautious that resiliency and moving forward are by your own steps. Nobody can, no one can do it. They can help hold you up, but it still has to be your footsteps that move forward.
Yes, having discernment when people are trying to take advantage of your grief or grieving period. Maybe they don't respect your unique process of grief. I think this can also show up as, people saying, well, it's been long enough, you should get over it, or it's been long enough, you shouldn't be acting this way anymore. And it's just really not fair to how unique the experience of grief is, and the experience of moving from grief to, these other states of gratitude and these states of resiliency. That is so personal, and you can't force people into that. And you also can't and should not allow people to almost, snake oil is a good word, but almost like persuade you into being in a different place than you are, or trying to give you solace in a way that is ingenuine to you. Like, it's so important to not waste time reading things or speaking with people who don't resonate with the way in which you're trying to grieve and the way in which you're trying to find resiliency. And also kind of tying what you were saying earlier is like, there will be breaths of fresh air that you will feel after your loss. You will have moments where it's like, for example, for you, I'm sure it's like, my granddaughter, I have 4 generations now, right? Like, my granddaughter is having her kid, and I get to be here to see that. And we, Grampy passed August 2020. Right. And I got married May 2021, and was 2 months later I was pregnant. So it was like this deep, we were still honestly all feeling his loss pretty significantly. And then we had this burst of joy and excitement and happiness, which I'm sure he had a lot to do with. And
he was there.
And he was like, it's time. They need some joy. So So having discernment and recognizing that not everybody's for your healing. Some people are there for other priorities. Some people think that you should do it a certain way, or be a certain way, or act a certain way, whether that's in grief or in your resilient period. And it's really important to just tune in with yourself and recognize, is this right for me? Is this where I should be? Is this really offering me the deep, genuine, authentic comfort and connection that I need right now? Or is this something else? I think for you, a big piece of that connection piece has been your support groups and volunteering. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what you do with that.
All right. Well, I'm part of a group called Helping Parents Heal, and it's very simplistic name, but it means, the mission is exactly what it says, Help Parents Heal. And that is a group for those who have lost children. It can be an adult child. It doesn't have to under 18 person. And these children have passed away from illness, by suicide, been killed like Wendy and Haley, but just a multitude. But we came together of a group of maybe 44 people in a room. It is now global. There's about 29,000 members globally. There's no membership fee. It's great. But again, it's geared to helping parents heal based on our own experiences. There's subgroups. There's the fathers group. There's the group people who have lost their only child, so they'll never get the grandmother and the great-grandmother beauty that I get to experience.
Sure.
That there's also a lot of, again, as I said earlier, a lot of material out there. One of my favorite books was written by a rabbi when the book was called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. A lot of really good insight there. It was not religious, but it had just kind of the random order of how things can happen. You can go online, and Mayo Clinic will even give you some insight as to, in particular, not beat yourself up because, oh my gosh, it's been a month and I'm still crying.
Yeah.
And I will say this, sometimes when I'm talking to groups, I don't want to say I'm apologizing, but I try to make them understand that, you mean 20 years later, you're still part of a support group? I mean, it may be the facilitator, but
Right.
it's like, yeah, because I have something that I can share.
Yeah.
I think will help you. It's like, maybe having a bottle of aspirin and you have a headache. I can help you. And so there's a lot of videos. There's a gentleman named David Kessler who does a lot of free videos online that work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who's sort of the pioneer lady of even mentioning stages of grief. And as I said, there's these stages, but they certainly don't come in order, and you don't check one off and it's over. You're not going to be the denial or the bargaining come and go totally. So I would say that just seek out things, and if something doesn't feel right, somebody wants to bring your loved one through a medium, and they want $1,000, and it's like, no, you don't. There's a lot of groups, especially Helping Parents Heal. This is all free when we have our gallery readings. So there's just multitude, but I think it's become a commodity. It's become commercialized, this grief aspect. One is because it's more recognized. It's okay to talk about this. If you were to say that, if I were to, 20 years ago, if I would have said to somebody, I found a quarter and I think it's from my dad, I'd be like, what?
Are you okay? But you're right.
So I know that quarter was from Wendy, a 1967 quarter that I just happened to get on her birthday. So, but then there's a lot of people that I share that story with, and I hear people find money all the time.
Yes.
That's true. You're not going to take away what I believe.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And the warmth and the comfort that gave me that day.
Right. Which I think is to me, I attribute that to kind of divine timing and right place, right time. And that we are meant to have these experiences to continue to build that resiliency, to remain resilient. And I think that, in not being physical, we probably have some other abilities. Maybe resiliency isn't the one we need when we're not physical. But basically, in everything you've said in this just now is that, your key to resiliency has been externalizing your experience, and rather than collapsing inward, although you did give yourself that time to do that too, because I think that's so much part of the process as well. But instead of just remaining collapsed in, you, from that darkness, found some light in it, which is, I can help people who are experiencing what I've experienced. I can make that process easier for them, even if it is 1%. And using your own light and your own experience, the knowledge that has come from that experience, your wisdom, and extended it outward instead of letting that darkness just remain and be the only thing. Because I think also, in losing people, our trajectory changes. Obviously, who we are changes, the way we function changes, but really we wouldn't have, you may have not ever been a part of Helping Parents Heal or MAD, or Haley may never have had the opportunity to donate her organs or her heart, for example, which now lives on in another person we know, Kelsey, who experienced dancing in the middle of her life out of nowhere, you know? So there's just these beautiful ripple effects that can come from such darkness, and having the ability to see that takes a minute. You're not going to see that the first probably year at least after something happens. But the more you connect yourself with others who have been through it, the more you can offer yourself as like a guide to other people almost, in similar experiences yourself. You feel less alone, and you feel more a part of the world, as it is now for you, rather than the world you were living in with these other people when they were there still. So,
well, I would say my closing words would be this: resiliency for me, the cornerstone is my love for my family, my love for my friends, my love to want to continue living, self-enjoyment, and providing enjoyment for others. But I would say just those four letters: love.
mm-hmm.
This, and maybe love them more than myself, and putting myself into some dark place. I want to be out there. I want to share. I want to share life.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so beautiful, and it's been hard not to cry a lot at this time, because you are one of my best friends, and I know so much about you, and my relationship with you is so unique. I think not a lot of people. My relationship with my grandfather was very unique too. Not a lot of people take the time to get to know their grandparents. So if you're one of those people, do it while you can. But
I give you a choice.
yeah, you didn't give me a choice. Yeah, that's okay. But for real, I mean, it's you know, hearing your experience of the grief that we've had in our family, and just every way in which you have overcome in your life is really inspiring and motivating to me. And your love shows up in a lot of ways, but to me personally, your love to me has been through learning about you, and has been about watching you help others. It's really that part in particular is what I resonate with most, and what builds me up in terms of feeling connected to you. So I really appreciate everything you had to say today. I think this was such a fantastic topic to dive into with literally nobody else but you would have been right. So I'm feeling grateful, and just love you so much.
And Grandmommy, which I like to be called,
Yes.
love you very much.